So chaliye, let us start with the lecture. In the previous lecture, we discussed about the instruction level parallelism, and we studied about the dependencies involved in case of instruction level parallelism. So we saw that basic blocks, then dependencies, then what were the hazards involved with these dependencies, and in the last we saw what is control dependence. So in this lecture, we will start with the control dependence. So control dependence basically uh, creates a control hazard into the system, and these control hazards result due to conditional jumps. So what are the conditional jumps and how we can overcome them? Let us see in today's lecture. So there are some techniques which are used to rectify these hazards, and we are going to discuss them. So there are some basic compiler techniques for exploiting the ILP, and one of them is loop unrolling. So what is loop unrolling? So let us start with loop unrolling. Suppose we have an example of the program. A for loop is under execution that we start with 1000 and it is a decremented for loop. So every time the value will be updated, and you know how a for loop works. The question is, or the point is, uh, in the following table we have shown that instructions are producing results. What are the results produced by the instruction, and what are the instruction using the results? So what is the latency involved in this part, and what are the stalls involved in this part? So we have discussed that the latency uh, is the time taken from the starting to the ending of the instruction, and stalls are the period, or the stalls is for which the instruction has to wait for some uh, input from other instruction. So that is basically a stall. So it has to be in cycles also. So if we start from this program, suppose we have a program which is an MIPS code. MIPS is million instructions per second code. So basically, this is a part of a superscalar architecture in which we are executing multiple instructions simultaneously. So this is a loop. For the purpose of an example, we have a loop. The instructions are load, then we have to perform an add instruction, that then a store instruction, then we decrement this counter by certain points, and when if it is not zero, a decision making has to be made at this point. Branch not equal to zero, then we have to switch over back to the loop to carry out again. So this is basically an example which we will see how branch unrolling is processed in this case. So before going to apply instruction scheduling, we will see the execution cycles without instruction. So if I part this program into certain uh, cycles. So in the first part, in the first instruction, we had starting of the loop, the load instruction. The load instruction says that we have to copy some part from this to some location or not. Then while the process is under execution, and as this instruction depends upon the previous instruction, it has some dependency. So this instruction cannot execute until the F naught value is updated. So there will be a stall for the execution of the next instruction till this part is completed. So it has to wait. So this waiting of the F2 or this addition, see this table below shows that we have a floating point ALU operation, and if instruction has to be fetched from some other floating point ALU operation, the stalls involved are 3 clock cycle stalls. If we have an instruction producing an ALU operation, and that has to be stored somewhere. There are 2 stalls in the clock cycles which are involved. And if we are storing just the load double, then we have only 1 clock cycle stall that is involved. So in this case, we are just loading a data. And in this case, if we are loading a data, so we have the stalls involved will be a single clock cycle. Then we are performing an addition operation. If we are performing an addition operation, so the number of stalls involved will be 2. So there are 2 stalls involved. In this case, we are storing this result. So third instruction will be to store from some this F4 location to some this location. So this is a read up, a write operation. So, and then if this process is taken, suppose that there is no stall in this part, then we have a decrement pointer at this point. So the pointer has to be decremented. So until the pointer is decremented, so it has to take a decision at this point whether this branch can be forwarded or it cannot be forwarded. So this decision has to be made at this point by using this certain instruction, that is a branch not equal to 0. So if branch is not equal to 0, then it has to be forwarded again to the loop. So there is one stall involved at this point when we have to make a decision. So uh, in this case, this is the actual program. So the actual program is actually taking 9 cycles to operate this instruction. There are 4 stalls are involved in the execution of the instruction, as we can see in this question. Let us see how to unroll these instructions. So there is an operation how we can decrease the number of clock cycles involved. So uh, this was the execution without instruction scheduling. If I schedule the instructions, so there can be some. This is a, suppose if we execute this loop 4 times. If we execute this loop 4 times, it will take around 36 cycles to execute for the execution. And if so, I have to reduce this time. So somehow we can reduce this 36 cycle time to execute this program in super scalar mode. So in order to do that, we can unroll this. That one of the technique is unrolling the loop 4 times. So what we are doing, we are not just ending the loop at this point, since this is the condition, and one stall is involved at this point. So what we will do, we will execute every instruction. See, one, then we have a stall at 3, then we have 2 stalls between 3 and 6, 4 and 5, and then the next instruction is loaded. So instead of going for the conditional check, which involves the stall, what we are doing, we are just executing 3 instructions with the stalls, and then we decrement, we update this load register by decreasing the pointer to 8 positions, and then again starting repeating over the same process of the same set of instructions. So we will repeat this set of instruction 4 times instead of just placing that loop. And what is the advantage? The advantage will be this BNEZ, which involves an install, has to be done only a single time. Instead of being repeated for the 4 times, this install will be executed only a single time. And if this install is being executed only a single time, then the number of clock cycles required for this execution will be reduced to 27 cycles instead of 36 cycles. So now, in order to execute this particular program, the stalls involved in the previous case were 4 stalls, and the cycles needed to execute this program was 36 cycles. But if we do the loop unrolling, in this case, in order, if we do loop unrolling, so loop unrolling involves instead of executing this instruction every time, we can reduce this part by just skipping and repeating the loop again and again with the with the stalls involved. And hence this instruction will be executed single time when the final termination of the loop has to be processed. So we saved almost around 4 to 5 stalls, and then the clock cycles required for the execution of this particular program will clock cycle required for the execution of this program will be 27 clock cycles only. So let us see, apart from unrolling, one more thing we can perform on this part. If we unroll the program, as well as we can reschedule this. So there were stalls involved on every part. As we are watching this, as we can see in this program, that we have load, then we have a stall, then we have performed add, then we have two stalls according to the stalls and latencies of this clock cycle. All right. So what we have done in this part, we done loop unrolling, and then in this case, with the loop unrolling, we have done the rescheduling of the loop. So this instruction actually, this load instruction. So see if we are performing this load. So we have a load instruction at this point. This has to simultaneously. This load instruction can also be performed, which takes only a single cycle. Then, if we are unrolling this loop 4 times, this load instruction can also be taken, and this load instruction can also. So the stalls involved in this case were single stalls only. So if we perform load instruction, these instruction 4 instruction can be loaded simultaneously. So if we load this instruction simultaneously, then similarly this add instruction can be loaded simultaneously in the execution unit. So every time we have a load instruction. So if we should reschedule our loop in some fashion, that first load all the instructions simultaneously, then execution unit will perform the addition simultaneously, then store will perform simultaneously, and then in the last we will repeat the loop. What needs to be changed, needs the thing that needs to be changed is the register address. Every time you have to change this register address according to, because loop has to perform the same operation as the original loop wanted to perform. This was the original loop that was executing. But since there were stalls involved and we need to reduce the cycles, clock cycles of the stalls. So what we did, we unrolled loop 4 times. Then after unrolling, we rescheduled this loop according to our requirement. So these were executing in the sequence, whereas the stalls involved were reduced. And in this case also, as we can see, the stalls involved are reduced completely, then store operation. So after rescheduling this loop, the overall clock cycles involved in this case are only 15 clock cycles. So this is the major advantage of this loop unrolling and loop rescheduling of the loop. So this gives increases the execution speed and helps to implement the features of the superscalar architecture. So this is an example of superscalar pipelining, how this process is done while making the decisions in control husbands. So we have a loop unrolling decision. How these loop unrolling decisions are made? Let us see. So it requires understanding of how one instruction depends on the other. So we have to observe the dependencies, obviously. Then loop unrolling is useful if the loop iterations were independent. So mostly, if there are so much dependencies, then the loop unrolling is not a fruitful decision, as we cannot reschedule so much instructions simultaneously. So it is implemented if there are not much of there are more of the independent instructions, then it is favorable for the for this technique. Then it uses different registers to avoid unnecessary constraint. So every time we are storing some value to some register set to get, so this involves use of many different resistors. This technique involves use of many different rules. Then we have to eliminate the extra test and branch instructions and adjust the loop termination and iteration code, as we have done in the previous case. By loop unrolling, we have repeated the loop many times. And in order to repeat the loop and perform the same process, we have to use different resistors to store the value and fetch it again from those resistors. Then in this case, and in order to do that, we have to eliminate extra test and the branch instructions. So then determine that loads and stored in unrolled loop can be interchanged by observing that the loads and stored from different iterations are independent. A transformation requires analyzing memory address and finding that do not refer to the same address. So in order to avoid them to refer to the same address, what we do, we assign different register sets, and hence this involves use of different register sets. So this is a constraint for this loop unrolling process, because it involves so much. Uh, it cannot deal with uh, very much dependencies involved in the programs in the loop. It is more favorable in case if the process is having a more number of independent instructions. To schedule the code, preserving any dependence needed to be yield the same result as the original code. So we can reschedule the code, but the dependencies has to be preserved. And obviously, the dependencies has to be preserved because if the code needs to provide you the same result as the original code, then dependencies need to be preserved. So there are three unrolling considerations, as we can see. The decrease in amount of it can be done by Amdahl's law. Amdahl's law was given discussed in the previous lecture. I had given use of Amdahl's law, that it is more favorable in parallel processing. So Amdahl's law, we can see the statement of Amdahl's law. It states that in parallelization, if P is the proportion of a system or a program that can be made parallel, and 1 minus P is the proportion that remains serial, then the maximum speed up can be achieved using n number of processors is 1 upon 1 minus P plus P by n. So you can see the statement of Amdahl's law. It is generally applicable for parallel processing, and hence we are talking about superscalar architecture. So obviously, in this case, the growth in code size for larger loop, it may increase the instruction cache miss rates and register pressure. Because loop unrolling involves the using of different register sets, allocating different values as we are rescheduling an instruction. So it has an impact or a pressure on the registers in the architecture. So loop unrolling reduces impact of branches on the pipeline. So much of the branches cannot be handled by loop unrolling. So we need a different technique in order to go every time, because if we have say multi-processor architecture, there will be much branching involved. So branching involved cannot be largely handled by this loop unrolling technique, and hence there is other way which handles this branching, which is known as branch prediction. So branch prediction is something. What is branch prediction and why it is done? So branch prediction is a technique which used to rectify control hazard. So control hazards takes place when we have conditional jumps. Conditional jumps are the jumps which instruction to conditional jump tells you whether which instruction has to fetch in the next cycle. Suppose we have a jump at this point, or if we have an instruction to execute at this point, and this is a conditional statement. And this conditional statement either can have a yes or a no. So if a condition is satisfied, then this particular jump instruction, in a certain condition. So we say that we have an instruction, as we are familiar with the instruction, jump if not equal to 0. So jump if not equal to 0. If it is equal to 0, if the condition is satisfied, if it is jump if not 0. So in case of not 0, it has to jump to certain location. So a decision making has to be made at this point. So if the condition is true, it has to load certain instructions in the pipelining previously. And if the condition is not true, then it has to load another instruction set in the pipeline. So suppose we have a loop L1, then we have certain instructions to be loaded in the program, I1, I2, I3, and say I4. So every pipelining involves 5 stages. One is fetch, then we decode, then data fetch, then execute, and then store. So decision making will be made at the first stage. So decision making has to be made at the first stage. So when we fetch the jump instruction, till we are going to execute that jump instruction, we do not know which decision has to be made. So when we have taken L1, suppose L1 was jump instruction. So jump instruction we fetch, then we decoded it, then we are going to execute that instruction. When we are going to execute that instruction, until that time, I1, I2, and I3 would have been in the pipeline. So at the point I4, if the condition is true, certain say at this point we had a jump. Sorry, at this point. In this case, we have a jump at I1. So what we need to do? If the pipeline is loaded, if the pipeline is loaded with I1 and a certain decision has been made at this point, so I1 will be executed, and if this decision is not known, then I2, I3 has to be loaded into the pipeline. But if it predicts that it has to, if the jump instruction condition is not satisfied, it has to jump over to L1 and then load I4, I5, I6 in the pipeline. So decision has to be made, and this decision will be done by the process of branch prediction. So branch prediction are used which shall predict whether a branch is taken or not. So if the wrong decision is made, the pipeline will be filled by the wrong instructions in the process of execution. And if we haven't made the correct choice at that part, that will be regarded as a misprediction, and that pipeline has to be flushed out. So there will be a penalty for every time we flush out this pipeline. So if we are flushing out at the point of execution, if we have a 5-stage pipeline, suppose the fetch, then decode, then data fetch, and then execute. So at the time of execution, I came to know that we have made a wrong choice. So let me write it. We have fetch, then we have decode, then we have data fetch, then execute, and then store. So when the jump instruction is being carried out, we came to know at this point, of execution that we have made a correct choice or not. If at this point of execution in the loop, I came to know that we have made an incorrect choice. So instead of the decision should have been, the prediction made was to go for I1, I2, and I3 instead of I4. So this fetch, decode, and data fetch will be loaded with I3, I2, and I1. But it has to be loaded. It has to be loaded with I4, I5, and I6 because the decision making is incorrect in this case. At this execution point, we will come to know that the decision making has been incorrect. So we need to flush out all the instructions which were incorrect and loaded in this parts. Will lead will be treated as a penalty. So I have to wait, or I have to go for a penalty of 3 cycles in this case, because at the point of execution we came to know that the decision was incorrect and we have to flush the pipeline and refill it again with the correct amount of instructions. Are you getting it? So the correct instruction has to be filled. We will flush out this pipeline with a penalty of 3 cycles, and we will refill this instruction and then execute that particular jump instruction of the branch. So branch prediction has to be made correctly. If we have any misprediction, then this misprediction leads to undoing some actions, increasing the penalty. But nothing much can be done about this, as it purely involves the case of the prediction, the condition of the prediction. It has to be true or it cannot be true, depending upon depending upon certain conditions. So let us switch over to the method of branch prediction. So branch prediction, it basically has can be categorized into two categories. One is a static branch prediction, and another one is dynamic branch prediction. So let us have a difference between the two. What is a static branch prediction and what is dynamic branch prediction? As we have an overview, when the performance or a process is said to be static when it is being done by the compiler. So in the case of a static technique, we have a delayed branch and a static prediction. Means the predictions had been certainly done before the compilation. That we suppose that the branch is taken. So every time the branch will be taken, it will be assumed as the branch is taken. Whether the decision making has been involved, the branch is not taken. So it is being statically done by the compiler, and it does not involve a real-time behavior of the program. So it is already programmed, the branch is not taken. So if the condition is true, then the branch will be taken. If the condition is not true, the branch is not taken. So every misprediction, so if there are conditions, every time the condition becomes false, and we have already, the compiler has already statically predicted that the branch is always taken. But every time the branch is not taken, so it will increase the misprediction frequency. So basically, we need to say that it's not a real-time analysis. It cannot take decisions on a real-time basis. So if there are single issues, it can deal with single issues. A static branch prediction can deal with single issues, and there is no hardware support. It is completely done by the compiler itself. Whereas a dynamic branch prediction is somewhat more favorable. And how this is favorable? Because this dynamic prediction works on the history of the predictions made. Suppose we had at some point in the previous instruction, the decision made was in a decision. We have there can if suppose we have a decision to make at this point, at a certain point. So there is a branch. So this regard as decision taken, and this regard as branch taken, and this is the branch not taken. So in this case, the condition, the prediction made, if the prediction is correct, so we have to go to this point. Hold on a minute, sorry. Suppose we have a conditional statement, and if this is a yes and this is a no, so two conditions, whether it's true or it's not. So if this condition is true, and branch prediction, if this condition is true, and the instruction sets according to this true condition has been taken. So as I mentioned previously, we took an example. Suppose this is an instruction at this point, we have a jump instruction. So this is a jump instruction has instruction sets I1, I2, I3, and at this point 4, at this I4 instruction, we have a certain loop carried out with I4. So if this jump instruction is yes, so if it is yes, then I1, then this jump instruction will load the pipeline from I4, I5, and I6. If it is a yes. So this branch will be taken and this will be stored as history in the dynamic branch prediction. And if it is not taken, if the branch is not taken, so the jump, instead of carrying out the jump operation, jump to L1, this will take execute the instruction number 2, instruction number 3 alone. So if the condition is not true, means it does not have to jump at this point, at jump at L1. So the executed instruction will be the instruction execution in the sequence. I2 and I3 will be executed instead of I4. But if the jump instruction has been true, so it will execute I4 after I1. So in this case, the branch is not taken. So the condition is not true, the branch is not taken. In this case, the branch is not taken. In this case, the branch is taken. So whatever the decision is, if the branch is taken or if the branch is not taken, it will be stored in the history. And we have a table. That the table is known as that table. In this case, is regarded as branch prediction table. So branch history is being recorded in a table, and on the basis of that table, it takes the next decision. In the next jump and in the next conditional statement, it will make the decision. So as the program progresses, so whatever decision it has taken in the history, the decision was uh, not taken. So in the next case, it will also go for decision not taken. It will predict not taken. Whether the condition may be true or it may take. So if the condition is true or it may take the decision, so then this will be updated in the history and it will follow in the subsequent decision making process. So the dynamic branch prediction works on the history uh, based on the previous predictions. It uses information on the real-time basis and it can handle multiple issues. So the prediction accuracy in case of dynamic branch prediction is more than that of a static branch prediction, and hence it is preferable to use dynamic branch prediction as compared to that of static branch prediction when multiple processes are involved. When we have to deal with single processes, then we can say or go for a static branch. So this is the branch prediction buffer or the table that we were talking about. It stores the previous history of the decisions made in the branches or the branch prediction. So there are certain levels of the branch prediction. One is known as one bit branch prediction. There is an entry at a two-state bit 1. If the bit is 1, then it was taken and it will be preferred at the next time. If the bit was 0, I predict it will not be taken next time. So there are certain decisions to be made, one bit branch prediction, then we have 2-bit branch prediction. So the accuracy improves in case of a 2-bit branch prediction, as it is updated every time, as we can see in this case. Commonly used to code most recent branch outcome and the most recent run of 2 consecutive item outcomes. The branch prediction mirrors the most recent run of 2. Only one misprediction per loop execution after the first time the loop is reached. So misprediction is, as we can see in the state 0, we had 3 mispredictions, then in this case 2, then in this case 1, and finally there was no misprediction, the accuracy improves. As the multiple stages are involved, the branch prediction accuracy improves. So this is a state diagram representing the states of branch prediction. This is the state of 0, predict not taken, so it repeats to not taken. Then in state 1, we have one not taken prediction. It will switch over to this part. Then we had 2 states taken. So in this case, we had 1 state taken, 2 not taken. So state 3, state 2, and state. So 2 not taken, 1 is taken. And in this case, state 3, 1 is not taken, whereas 3 are taken. So on the basis of dependence, we can see that the chances are, so branch prediction performance. The branch prediction performance, branch frequency, misprediction frequency will be decreased. And how to reduce misprediction frequency? We have to increase the buffer size. But buffer size of the table cannot be increased to a certain point because of it involves a larger area and greater power dissipation. So it has to be restricted. Empirically, it has a little effect beyond 4096 entries, so it can be restricted to these. So this is all for today. In the next lecture, we will discuss about dynamic scheduling and register renaming. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can switch over to Google Classroom.